I'm here with Beta Delisi of Stonegate Legal Services. And today we're asking Beta, how should landlords handle late rent, non-payment of rent? It's going to be a good one. Stay tuned. Hi, Beta. How are you?
Good, good. Good morning, Terry. How are
I'm
you?
doing well, thanks. Okay, so late rent, non-payment of rent. Before we get into this, I just want to ask you, what's some advice that you can give landlords, especially new landlords, before they get into a situation where they've got to deal with these tenants who are late? What's some advice you can give?
Well, firstly, Terry, 95% of headaches can be avoided during the vetting process. So, by looking at the history of the tenant, by trying to, you know, kind of do a little bit of detective work on your own just to see if you and the tenant are a good fit. And by doing a little bit of detective work, and by detective work, I mean by vetting the tenant, checking out their sources of income, verifying their sources of income, you can eliminate 95% of these non payment and late payment headaches.
Yeah, and I agree. And we've got a whole video on screening tenants, so that might be a good one to watch. Yeah, and it's again that preparation, right? Know who's moving in, do your credit checks, employment checks, all that stuff, and that'll get rid of a lot of your problems. Okay, so next question for you. Walk me through what's an N4? Is this something that's appropriate in these situations?
So, an N4 is a notice for non payment of rent. And it basically tells the tenant you have to pay all of the arrears on the N4 or you have to move out within 14 days.
Right.
Now, in the notice, it also tells the tenant something like you can choose to do nothing. You don't move out and don't pay the arrears, and then the landlord has to proceed through the legal channels of filing the notice by way of an application with the landlord and tenant board, and then proceeding through those legal channels in order to obtain a termination order.
Okay. All right. So, in what circumstances can a tenant withhold rent?
Well, they really shouldn't withhold rent for any reason. Often, the most common reasons that the tenants hold back rent is mainly for maintenance. There's issues with maintenance. They've put in several requests and the landlord chose to do nothing. So in order to kind of shake up the landlord or get a response from the landlord, what they do is they withhold rent because that is going to have landlords respond right away when they don't receive their money when the rent becomes due.
Okay. All right. So is that legal? It's not legal, is it, to withhold the rent?
Well, it's not that it's not legal. People do it anyways. Now, if a tenant has an issue with respect to maintenance, they should not withhold rent. Withholding rent is not the answer. The answer, if they have maintenance issues, is to bring an application through the board informing the board how many times the tenant has reached out to the landlord with respect to these unresolved maintenance issues.
Okay.
Because once the tenant stops paying the rent, the board sees the tenant in a negative light.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's something we want to keep all of our paperwork and okay, but pay your rent to the landlord, right? And then you're
Pay your
pursuing
rent
other
no
means.
matter what.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So next question for you, Beta. Can a tenant void eviction for non-payment of rent if they pay the rent? So we've got okay. So you haven't paid the rent. We've gone through the process, and then presumably the day or to move out, all of a sudden you pay the landlord. Is that kosher?
Yes,
Okay.
Terry, actually, tenants have, believe it or not, four opportunities to void the notice, void the eviction, and preserve their tenancy by paying the arrears. The first opportunity is before the termination date in the N4.
Okay.
The second opportunity is before the hearing date. The third opportunity is on the day of the hearing. And the fourth opportunity is before the sheriff arrives to physically evict the tenant.
So we can go through as a landlord, we can go through the whole process. We've got our costs. It's wasting your time, landlord's time, aggravation, the whole thing. We've got a sheriff ordered, and then, oh, by the way, sorry, here's the money, and
That's
we're
it.
staying. Okay.
Pay to stay. I call it pay to stay.
Pay to stay. Okay.
Pay to
So
stay.
just on like, what about walk me through a little bit of partial payments as well? Like if, because I've heard some instances of that where, we're 6 months behind. Okay, we're getting rid of you. And then there's, a partial payment that's made of, a half a month's rent type thing. So the thing gets punted again. Is that accurate? Is that true?
No, not partial payments.
Okay.
Not partial payments. The entire rent arrears amount has to be paid in full in order to void an eviction.
Okay. All right. So pay it all off. But
Yeah.
thing to be aware of as a landlord, because you may have another tenant moving in the following day, right?
Yes, that's a very dangerous
Yeah.
scenario because if a landlord thinks that they're going to evict the tenant and they commit to another lease and there's another tenant coming in the day after and the current tenant pays the arrears, then the landlord has put themselves in a very difficult position
Mhm.
where now they're going to they may be sued by that new
Right.
tenant for damages.
So I think the the play here is perhaps similar to, if I'm buying a tenanted property and I've got somebody else I want to put in there, you wait until the tenant has moved. The locks have changed; they're not there, right? So in this instance, if you've got, say, the tenant's got to be out August 31st, don't rent it out until October 1st,
Correct.
right?
Don't rent anything out. Don't wait till you have the keys in your
Yeah.
hand, like you mentioned, Terry, before you commit to any lease.
Yeah, because you can't rent one apartment to two people. Okay,
That's right.
Beta, question for you. What issues can a tenant raise at a non-payment rent hearing in order to justify why they haven't paid rent? So I guess I'm the tenant, I'm going in, I'm hauled before up to the carpet here. What are some excuses, some reasons that I can use for not having
So
paid rent?
the common ones we spoke about, maintenance issues,
Hmm.
those are the most common issues that tenants raise. And for example, they'll say, for example, landlord Terry has not fixed the roof. The roof has, is leaking. It's damaged my belongings. It's damaged my furniture. That's why I've stopped paying rent. Right. Other issues that they can bring up is that landlord took an illegal deposit and he has not returned it. The landlord increased the rent illegally and I've paid it without knowing. So now I'm going to hold back until I receive all of the rent differential for the illegal deposit that I paid. But Make Me Terry is for maintenance.
Okay, that's the one that
Common,
you see for the most part, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean it's interesting things. I think the biggest point here though is what we talked about at the beginning, Beta. Do your checks. Do not get into the situation where you've got some issues, right?
yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Terry? There's actually two new tools or newer tools that people should definitely look into when they're doing their checks. The first website is called openroom.ca. And openroom.ca allows landlords to upload their orders from the landlord and tenant board. So if you go on this website, Terry, you can put in, let's say, for example, Beta Delisi. I'm your prospective tenant. You put in Beta Delisi. You can actually see if there are any landlord and tenant board orders that include those keywords.
Hmm.
And that you can make a decision on, if I owe $20,000 rent to another landlord, are you going to really take me on for your unit?
Right.
And the second one, Terry, is canli.org. CANLII.org. Same concept, except Canly is more regulated, whereas Open Room is a public landlord website.
So and I'm sure the people who run these websites have thought about this, but are there any kind of privacy issues associated with that? It's all above board and right?
Yeah, it's well, since the landlord and tenant board orders are becoming public, there's no issues with privacy anymore.
Gotcha. Okay, I understand that now. All right. So are there any final points that you have, Beta?
Vet your tenants. Do your screening
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Verify everything. Use the internet. The internet is a great tool for vetting. You can find out a lot about someone just by Googling their name. right? And checking them out on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, those checks there, but you do bring up that that one thing about just a simple Google search, right?
Yes.
You know, if their handle is Kegmeister123, you know, they might not be the quiet person that they're saying, right? That
That's
they
right.
are. So something to avoid, right? And watch. Beta, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, and I hope everybody enjoys this. If you have any questions whatsoever, Beta and I, we do want to hear from you. So our email, cell phone will all be in the link below. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Beta.
Thanks, Terry.